So the self-serving attributional bias is our tendency to attribute failures or bad events to external circumstances and successes or good events to oneself. This might remind you a little bit of the pessimistic and optimistic expectancies we looked at last time. So an example, athletes might attribute losses to bad referees, but attribute victories to talent and hard work. Or politicians might attribute political victories to their own popularity, but losses to rigged elections. So this is all about how the explanations we offer or the attributions we offer can serve our own egos or keep us from feeling bad about ourselves. So the self-serving attributional bias might look something like this. If we have someone who gets an A+ on her test and makes an internal attribution, she is taking credit for positive events. And at the same time, if we might consider the same student fails, gets an F grade, instead of saying, this is something about me, she says the teacher doesn't like me, blaming external factors. So students tend to make external attributions for their failures. The questions were bad, the professor is a sadist, and internal attributions for their successes. We'll find out that there are differences in these attributional patterns among some groups. So the fundamental attribution error is what we call the failure to recognize the importance of situational influences on others' behavior and the corresponding tendency to overemphasize the importance of dispositions on behavior. So the example that I always give that is not on this page here is if you're driving in traffic and the car comes and comes up behind you really fast and comes around you and cuts you off kind of close. The typical thing people say is something like this: what a jerk. So we've just made a dispositional attribution for that person's behavior. What a jerk. We have now said this person has the disposition of a jerk. He's always like this. He's just a bad kind of guy. Now imagine a different situation. You are really late for work and you really like your job, and this is like the 4th time this has happened, and you know you're going to be in trouble, but you might be able to make it if you hurry and if traffic is calm. And so you're zooming along and you come up behind a car and you don't have any choice. You just pass him, cut him off kind of close because there's a car coming, and zoom on by. And as you're going by, you maybe put your hand up and wave and say, sorry, I normally am not like this. It's just that I'm late. So in that instance, we've made a situational attribution for our own bad behavior. So this right there is the fundamental attribution error, where we explain ourselves by blaming the situation, and we explain others by blaming their disposition. And so here we have another example of this, of 2 people making dispositional attributions about the other's behavior. Ben is incompetent. He can't finish his projects on time. Anna's unreliable. She can't even attend a meeting on time. So we have this kind of blaming going on, whereas both of them are probably explaining any errors on their part in terms of just a situation. So Hurricane Katrina is kind of old now, but I thought I'd bring it forward anyhow. Because it played kind of a role. So this was a really bad hurricane that happened, oh my gosh, now I can't even remember what year it was, probably a decade ago. And some people could get out and others didn't have ways to get out. They didn't have cars, they didn't have resources, they couldn't get out. Their situations differed. Yet, when people were commenting on what happened, why some people were left behind and needed to be rescued from their houses, which were underwater, people who commented on it didn't consider that some people just didn't even have the means. They just explained it in terms of the individual's choice to evacuate or not to evacuate before the hurricane's arrival. Sort of like blaming the victim without considering the situation. These people are irresponsible. Now, this relates to something we call the just world hypothesis. And this is a way of viewing the world that allows you to feel like that you deserve the good things you have because you're a good person. Ergo, others who don't have those good things must not be good people. So this belief, and we can consider this a schema. I got at this a little bit for you in your chapter 4 responses, I believe. People get what they deserve in life and deserve what they get. This is a schema. And it's also a fundamental attribution error that says, I have these good things because I deserve it, and others have those bad things because that's what they deserve. So we have this little fish who's about to be eaten saying, there is no justice in this world. The middle-sized fish saying, there's some justice, and the big fish saying, the world is just, who can't even see the perspective of the little fish. And another belief that goes along with this is good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. So here again, we come to be blaming people's dispositions for situations that might make it difficult for them to do the things that they themselves have done. They don't recognize, say, the way that their own good fortune rode on the backs of others, like those who built the roads and picked up the garbage and created the schools and did their laundry for them so that they could study, and all of those things. Instead of recognizing all of those things, all of the situations that contributed to their own success, they think it's them. I worked hard, I did it. And they probably did work hard. But they're forgetting the situation that facilitated that work. And likewise, gosh, many of the people I've worked with here have so many situational things that get in the way of that same studying, you know. And so that just world hypothesis would sort of be taking credit for success and blaming people who don't have a similar situation or for their own situation. So some of the causes of the fundamental attribution error include these two factors. We name them perceptual salience and the actor-observer effect. And so think of perception as the way we take in the world around us. We pick up certain things, miss other things. And salience, another word for importance. So to what extent are what things figure strongly in our perceptions? What do we notice? What makes an exclamation point in our brains? So we notice some things before we notice others. It depends on our background and our experiences, and it influences how readily a potential cause comes to mind. So if the first thing we notice about somebody relates to, say, socioeconomic status, then that might influence how readily we attribute something about maybe about a situation or about a stereotype belief we have, but the cause for their behavior might come to mind. And what do we perceive? Well, we usually perceive the people first. We are all programmed to perceive people and be very aware of people in our environment. And that means that we are not giving good perceptual salience to the context or situation. So this guy's shooting the basket. He's focusing on his task. That's his job. But our focus is not on his task. We're not analyzing how difficult is this shot, et cetera, how much stress is there. We're looking just at the actor. And so for that reason, we tend to be more aware of what the actor's doing than the situation that might be motivating this action. So attribution and cognition. We can often correct biased attributions we might make about another person. So our impulse when someone cuts us off and we feel like we're going to get pushed off the road might be to say, what a jerk. But then very often, if we're wise, we can become aware of what we just did and then add to ourselves, oh, he might have an emergency. There might be something going on that I don't know about in his situation. But when we're stressed or cognitively busy, we're less likely to make these cognitive corrections. So as soon as you know about this, you're going to catch yourself doing this. Maybe you will. I have done, making dispositional attributions and then correcting myself. But if I'm really strained, I'm less likely to do that. And these are called cognitive corrections. It's a good thing that we can do. And what they did in this situation is they either made people busy or not busy. And then they were kept busy by having to memorize a list of words. And when those people were kept busy memorizing the list of words, they didn't correct an automatic impression that a person was dispositionally anxious. They didn't take into account the nature of the material being discussed. Instead, they just said this is an anxious person. So they were more likely to not correct their dispositional conclusion.